So we're here today with Greg Johnson from Tuvoli. We're going to give Greg a chance to talk about what Tuvoli does and how he got here. Greg?
Thanks. That's a pretty loaded question. But, I mean, how I got here.
That was intentional.
Yeah. I mean, how I got here, like we could take an hour, right? I mean, been a
Well, that's actually a good
road.
question. How did you get it? Did you take the Bonanza or did you?
I did. I flew down to Bonanza.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like to practice the more you preach part of it.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. And actually, on the way back, I'm flying one of our customers home to North Carolina.
That's awesome. I was threatening these guys last night with starting to fly again.
Well, I think I was actually thinking about, what is that coffee and cars with, the
Cars and coffee, yeah.
Cars and coffee thing, right? I was like, I could do that in an airplane, right? Throw a couple GoPros up there and fly someplace and interview folks. We should take this thing and do it.
We'll grab Chris.
Grab Chris. He'll help us with that, right?
The stuff's compact.
That's it. It'd be fun.
So, I mean, really, you have a pretty good history. You may have started something that became pretty big.
Well, there was a day there where I created this company called One Sky. It was One Sky Jets at the time. The jets got dropped later on, but yeah. And then before that, there was this little run at Fedex where I, did some process improvement, fun stuff. And before that, I flew really briefly for money and decided that I liked, flying where I want to go, when I want to go better. And I'm a little too entrepreneurial. I don't want to say that. Like, I love flying, and anybody that's, flying aircraft, I think that's awesome. But for me, I always wound up sort of in leadership one way or another, right? And waiting at FBOs for other folks was hard for me.
I mean, I totally agree with that. When I wanted to fly since I was that big, and when I got my first job and I was doing my flight training, I could point to the exact moment in time where it's like, man, that job kind of sucks.
Well, it's hard. I mean, I have so much respect for the charter guys that are doing that stuff because, I watched more movies and read more books in FBOs waiting on people, when I did that for a brief period of time. And I was like, this is, it's a challenge. I mean, when especially when schedules change and all that kind of stuff, right? You're sitting there hoping to be home with the family, knowing that the principles that you're flying, because I did a Part 91. I knew that somebody was trying to get home for a soccer game. And I know the soccer game was starting at 6 and now it's 6 o'clock and they're still not there. And I'm going, are we staying overnight? Are they showing up in 10 minutes? Do I get another bag of peanuts out of the machine? Do I order a pizza? What's happening here? And you don't know.
It was the lifestyle part of it. That was the part I was like, it's not that interesting.
Well, it's hard. It's not an easy deal. Like the flying of the plane is amazing, right? But all the logistics around it for your personal life and how you plan for it is really hard, right? Because you're at the the service exists because it's flexible. So you're no matter what you do, you're signing up for that. And that's, in things that we do since then, I have a lot of respect for the people that are doing that. Anything we can do to make their jobs easier, right, is a huge win. And I think there's a lot of opportunity with tech today to make that flight crew member's job less stressful, right?
Yes.
Because let's face it, every time you land at an FBO, with your aircraft, you've got a laundry list of things you're thinking need to go right in order to deliver that experience to the customer, right, when you depart. So when you land, it's like your mind shifts from, okay, passengers just departed, to now what are the 20 things that could go wrong that could impact my departure.
Yeah, I mean, that's some of the stuff we're working to try and address here on our side with the FBO software, is trying to feed back more information to the crews, service confirmation type stuff. Your fueling is done. Yep. Actually, you had a funny story not too long ago where...
I did. I mean, I fly around a lot in the Bonanza, and that gives me, first-person perspective to how the whole ecosystem works. And I had a, overnight stop, did what you would do, and asked to have the plane topped off before you leave the next morning. And, this is not the only time this has happened, but, as soon as you place that fuel order, I think in any pilot's mind, it's like, well, is that really going to be handled? I mean, some guys will say, hey, I'm not going to leave for the hotel until I make sure the fueling's happened because I need to sleep tonight. Well,
yep.
I didn't have time for that. I had to rush to my meeting, put in the fuel order in a way that I thought was really credible. Like I thought I really felt good about it. Like there are some FBOs where it's almost like it's like a scrap piece of paper or something, and you just go, I don't know, I better call. In this case, I felt pretty good. And then we showed up the next morning early, and plane wasn't fueled. And, thankfully I had enough buffer time in my day. Not only that, the XBO staff wasn't there. So that was a little bit challenging. Showed up, mad scramble. I was going, do I have to go to the other FBO on the field in order to get fueled? Because there's nobody here and I have a meeting to get to and I need gas. I can't make it without gas. And I was literally about to fire up the plane and go to the other FBO when the guy showed up. And then I was like, hey, you guys
didn't. Just late?
He was late. Yeah. No real good excuse for it. And, but he, then he had to QC the truck and bring it over and whatever. And thankfully, like I said, I had put enough buffer into my schedule that it didn't really kill me that day, but it could have. Like if I was on a tighter timeline, that would have been brutal. And that's not the only time that kind of thing happens. It's very hard today in FBOs, with a lot of the sort of the legacy systems that are in place to actually track who has done what, when, where, right? And prove that service delivery. So when I've seen what you guys have built, it's next level in terms of helping an FBO deliver on the service expectation.
Yeah, that's it. It's helping the FBO deliver. That's what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. It's so funny. It's such little things. I can order something on Uber Eats and I get the notification the driver left, the driver's on his way.
Right.
And we're just getting to the point now where we can tell you that your fueling is done.
Right. No, it's true.
Industry's a little behind.
It is. But it does come down, when you think about it, like I said, in my career, I did a ton of process improvement. I was an industrial engineer, ran a team of industrial engineers at Fedex.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I always kind of gloss over the Fedex thing, which is a little foundational to the...
little bit. I think the amount of learning about quality that you get when you're helping manage the system and service delivery and everything at sort of a higher level inside an organization like FedEx was unbelievable. When you think about back in the 90s, I could at home log into my computer. It was dial-up, right? And I could see, so much information on any package in the FedEx system. I could see any employee when they clocked in and clocked out. I could put all the data together, and be able to deconstruct where service was succeeding and failing across the system because it was all tracked. There were fingerprints on everything, right? Every package got scanned over and over and over again. And when you imagine that back in the 90s, you could call FedEx, their customer service line and go, where's my package? And they'd say 3 blocks away back then, right? No internet.
Yep.
They hadn't invented the internet yet. FedEx built its own sort of virtual internet with packet radio and things like that. So
that's incredible.
So when you have seen that level of sort of accountability, really, right? Because that was it. And Fred Smith used to say, the information about the package is as important as the package, right? Because if the package isn't where it's supposed to be, and we can tell them where it is and what it's going to take to get it there, right? Then we win, right? If we're like, well, I don't know, and that was everybody else, then that's inferior. And that was how FedEx got the price premium, right? He said, if we're going to convince people that they need to get something overnight, we better damn deliver it overnight, right? By 10 a.m.
Yep.
Right? It wasn't just by overnight. It was overnight by 10 a.m. And if it was 10:15 and the package wasn't there, we knew where it was, and then I can tell you all kinds of stories about all the different ways that promise can go wrong, right? Everything that you can imagine, that could happen.
So how'd that education translate into the aviation world when let's go back earlier. Before that, you did a stint in an FBO, right? Was that earlier?
That was earlier, yeah. That was sort of while I was going to college, my first real aviation job was at an FBO. I started out, I didn't even have a proper line service job, but there was to speak to the value of Embry-Riddle, I went to all the FBOs on the field closest to my house and said, I'm, Embry-Riddle student. I'm here for the summer looking for a job in aviation. And this guy that was responsible for line services at one FBO said, we don't really have a job, but I'll make one because, I like cool. Embry-Riddle and I want to give you an opportunity, right? That job was cleaning airliners at night. So, but it got me a badge and it got me on an airplane. But literally I started out, I think it was, I forget how many nights a week, but it was maybe 5 nights a week or something. I was with 2 other guys. I got paid $25 to clean a US Air MD-80s. I think we cleaned 2 of them a night, right? And up in Portland, Maine. And, my first GSE experience was a lav car because our job was interior. We had to dump the lavs and we had to clean the planes. And so I sort of say, look, if there was anybody that could say I started at the ground level, that's it. I don't think it gets much more entry level.
No, all the new line guys, that's their job is the lav.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah. The truck was named Blue Thunder. Anyway, then that worked its way into, pumping gas on the weekends. And then, I think the next summer I ended up being a supervisor there. They did both airline and general aviation stuff. And then I heard through the grapevine that FBO was going to open a new location, and a switch went off in my head, and I said, I want to run that. Right. Sophomore year, summer school. And so I went to the general manager of the prime location and said, I want, you're going to need somebody to run that new FBO. I don't run that FBO. And he said, well, the owner's going to want a business plan. And I'm like, well, how do I do that? And he actually, the GM, to his credit, gave me a book and said, here's a book on how you should do it. I found the business plan not too long ago. It was printed out on dot matrix printer paper. I had to peel off the little ears on the side of it.
Yep.
That just dates this whole thing. And I presented that to the owner. I had gone and gotten all my pilot's licenses at flight safety in the sort of earlier on. So I didn't do all my flying in Embry-Riddle, so I had my CFI at this point. The owner's reading through the plane and he goes, I wasn't planning to have a flight school. And I was like, well, I just got all my licenses. It'd be really cool if we had a flight school. And the guy shrugs his shoulders and says, all right, we'll buy a couple planes. And that was the beginning of my sort of
flying career.
Well, I guess that was, after my first paid gig flight instructing was the flight school that I started as a part of that, which was
with
kind
a
of
question.
Fun. Huh?
With a question. That you started with a question.
With a question, right? Which was, well, I'd like to have that. So we had 3 airplanes at the flight school there, and that was fun. But within 18 months, this was an airport where they had only had one FBO. Came in and the facility was fantastic. It was former corporate flight department. And within 18 months, we had 80% of the business on the field, and the other guys were just, they were ready to sell out. So when I saw that was happening, I went back to Embry-Riddle and finished my degree. But, this was back in the days where we had to win every plane with binoculars and trying to figure out, okay, where did that plane come? There was no flight tracking or any of that. It was like, okay, I was looking up in the the MBAA directory. Can I figure out if it wasn't that, I was buddies with the guys in the tower, and I'd be like, where did that plane come from? Where do I have,
My first FBO we worked at was Priester out in Chicago. We had a program they called Rabbit Ears.
Okay.
So the line guys, whatever line guys got the most tail numbers coming to the airport, that you'd win a prize every week.
Yeah.
Just to collect it, to give it to the staff to track the tail numbers down and reach out to them.
Yep. Well, it got to be the point, right? I mean, I'm sure you've done this too when you've in your role where plane would land and and I'd look at that tail number and I knew who it was because, if you get to know your airport and who's coming from where, right? And I'd pick up the phone and I'd call if they didn't taxi into me, they'd pick up the phone and call that flight department and they'd get to the point where they were like, we knew you were going to call. We actually had a bet going on how many minutes it was going to be from when we had wheels down. And I'm like, let me go pick up your crew. Bring them over here. Show, I was like, I'm not going to give up, and that's how we won them, right? It was like,
just try me.
That's right.
Yep.
Just come once.
Yep. And win them with the service. So all that experience, you got the process experience, you Embry-Riddle student, you get the process experience at Fedex, some real world experience on the ramp, flight schools.
Yeah.
How did that become One Sky?
Well, there was a day at FedEx where, I was really good at sort of breaking the ceiling, and I'm just, I would call it, I was an intrapreneur where I just was unconventional in the way that I did things at FedEx. So I was creating cool solutions. I brought computer programmers onto what was typically an industrial engineering team because I felt like, it was if we got the right information to the right people at the right time, that was how we improved performance. It wasn't just like telling somebody to work faster. It was they needed the data, and we had the data. And so
that sounds very familiar.
Yeah, but you look at it and go, I can get it. What would happen is I'd say, because of that, I've got God level access to all the FedEx stuff. I could go pull it, but I was like, we need to do it on a systematic basis and give it to the frontline manager so that they can, both service and productivity were going to be dependent on them having the right information to make the right decisions.
Yep.
Right. So I brought programmers on that could mine that data and turn it into reports that these guys could use to deliver better results. And, I got to a point where I had risen as far as I could within a company that big without having to sort of wait in line. Like I essentially, it was like, move to Memphis and wait your turn and you're going to go far. And so I love the you're going to go far part. The move to Memphis and wait in line thing wasn't so fun. So I started looking for other opportunities. And ironically, the guy that I did that FBO with had just bought a charter company. And so he said, I will make you a partner in my charter business if you want to come get involved in this, right? And I was like, well, I didn't want to work for any of the other airlines because I just kept seeing them go bankrupt every few years. And there was another big public company, and I felt like I'd done my big public company stint. So that sounded intriguing. Private aviation sounded different. And I got in there, and within 6 months of sort of, running this business, I realized how hard it was to scale, right? Because I was spending all my time talking to the owners of the planes who, this is their most expensive asset. They've entrusted us with it. They want to know what's going on all the time. And in parallel to that, with all the my tech, I've always had one foot in tech and one foot in aviation. I rebuilt the company's website, and this is like 2003. And I did lead gen on the website, which was like most websites at the time were nothing but a
page.
Yeah, it was a brochure, right?
Yep,
but I actually had baked in the ability to sort of get a quote or request, a quote on the website. And we started to get great charter leads from places that we didn't have any airplanes. I mean, we're a Northeast-based charter operator, 9-jet fleet, Gulfstreams and lower, but small, in my opinion. And then, I looked at these leads and I was like, I think there's a bigger opportunity to aggregate supply and demand in the space. More interesting to me than trying to scale this business where everybody wants to talk to a principal. And how do you can't have enough principals. I mean, it's interesting to see how that's changed a bit because there are larger operators now, and that's getting sort of, that's changing a bit from where it was. But back in the day, that was, very hard to scale. So at any rate, long story short, I went to my partner there and said, I don't think I can really do enough with this charter company. It's just structural limitations. However, I think there's bigger opportunity to aggregate supply and demand in the industry, and that was the genesis for One Sky Jets. So we became very good at digital lead generation online and then directing them to the best operators. And we were very process-driven in our approach, and a lot of that came from Fedex, right? I mean, we prided ourselves on service delivery, and I used to tell my people there, if we're going to be a charter broker, which we're a charter broker that understands the industry, that is passionate about planes. We're not from Wall Street or whatever, right? We actually care about the people we're doing business with, which is not universal.
I mean, that's FBO people,
right.
FBO software by FBO people. It's right. It makes all the difference in the world knowing it's not just a program.
That's right.
It's a solution.
That's right. So at any rate, I would tell our folks that if all we're doing is matchmaking and we're taking a customer that we get through our lead gen and we're introducing them to a charter operator and we're not doing any better than what that charter operator can do on their own, we really don't have a business, right? We can't make any money there. So what we actually did, and it feeds into what we're still talking about, you and I are talking about today, was we said, look at all the places where this could fall apart. And I looked at it with all the experience I had with tracking all the data at FedEx. We actually had the equivalent of package tracking for every trip inside the platform that we built to manage the One Sky business, because every single customer interaction was logged by who did it, right? What was the conversation about? What were what are all the attributes? And so we had this running log on every single piece of flight activity, right, that informed us. And so if somebody called up, right, through our company and wanted to know something about a trip, well, we would go right to that trip, and that person, whoever it was in the company, right, could log in, look at that trip, and tell the customer what they needed to know.
Have the information.
And have
at
the
their fingertips.
At their fingertips, right there. Now, a lot of the way that we had good quality information is still a problem today. Like, you would think that in 2022, right, when we were checking on a catering order or wanting to know if the aircraft was good to go ready to go at that airport location, or all the services have been delivered, or all of that, right, that we would have a way to do that digitally, even back in the late 2000s. But here we are in 2022, and everybody's still doing it with phone calls, right? But we made a lot of phone calls. We recorded all the phone calls. I was big on sort of data collection, so we could really know if there was ever a service failure. There's one thing that FedEx taught me: if there was ever a service failure, you need to have the data to know what went wrong, and then from there you can understand root cause and figure out how to fix it and make sure it doesn't happen again. And that was how we differentiated OneSky, and we did really well. I remember knowing that we had figured it out when I was talking to one of our customers, and they said, "I'm not sure what you do over there, right? But when we fly with OneSky, it just works. Like, we don't have problems. That's why we fly with you guys, right?" It wasn't that, we put Crystal on the plane. It was that you got what you paid for, and you just, and if there was an issue, we were on top of it. We knew what to do. We had our game together. We could recover mechanical faster. We could, we just knew what to do, and so, if we fast forward, one way to look at it is on the customer relationship management side of this business. The software that a charter operator or a charter broker has that really helps them deliver a better quality product doesn't really exist. It's all very transactional, right? It's we can, help you find a plane. We can do the basics of sort of logging what FBO you're going to use, or this or that or the other. But the customer interaction and and how you manage your sales team and make sure that they are on top of it, software for that doesn't really.
I got a question.
Yeah.
What do you say to the brokers that then think technology gets in the way of them providing personal service? I've heard that.
Well, technology doesn't get in the way. Technology should augment, right? I believe full on that it's a relationship business, right? But if we just listen to what I was saying about how we did things, with OneSky to deliver service, it was data that allowed our people to be smarter and deliver a better product when they were talking to the customer, right? So, in this world, charter customers come to charter brokers for advice because, booking a good quality private jet is complicated, right? And it's very hard to just serve up a price online and have someone feel comfortable as a new customer that they're going to get everything they need if they don't talk to somebody that can really walk through and explain the nuances, right? There are a lot of nuances. Just think about catering on a private jet flight, right? The plane is important, but boy, if the food is horrible, then the plane doesn't matter, right? I mean, and there's so many little.
So weird how important the catering is.
It is.
The $50 ham sandwich is critical.
Yeah, when I was in my FBO days, like how we would deliver good food, because we owned it at the FBO level. If we're going to recommend a caterer, and there was all the silly stuff like, are they putting the food in the right size container so that it actually, you can't do a cheese platter like this and put it on a plane, right?
It's a lot of logistics.
It's the little stuff. So getting back to your question about the brokers, it's great technology combined with an understanding that relationships matter. It's how you deliver the best experience anywhere today, right? So it's the augmentation. It's being able to know everything you need to know in order to answer all the questions that customer's going to have, including, well, where's my plane? Where's my food? Where's my black car?
Which we're finally getting to.
Yeah, but so it's a combination, right? Good technology helps a broker that has good relationships deliver consistent quality to their end user.
So you went from OneSky, which was acquired by Sentient.
Yeah.
And when was that?
2010.
2010.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that was over a decade ago.
Yeah. That is weird. So that continued to roll up over time, right?
Yes, that brand existed within the family there,
the directional family, and
ultimately, right. It's we're dialing back to when it was really Flight Options and Sentient, and OneSky was a brand in there, and then the directional ultimately decided to use OneSky internally. Part of that was, they had it really started to happen after FlexJet and Flight Options came together because they wanted to operate FlexJet and Flight Options from an internal perspective as one company. right? And so to sort of bridge that gap, they had a brand called One Sky, and it just
Kind of
made
makes sense,
right? So that that's where they chose to repurpose the One Sky brand to kind of as an internal brand, talking about that, and then ultimately all of the companies that fly people within directional ultimately wound up under that One Sky umbrella, shared services.
And all that work led up to Tuvoli.
One way or another, yes. I mean, I ended up going off and doing a Silicon Valley startup in the middle there. I at one point I questioned myself and said, am I really doing the right thing? I'm good with technology and process improvement and all of that. There's this crazy stuff happening over on the West Coast with all these tech startups and whatnot. Maybe aviation should be a hobby and not my career, right? I think probably everybody in aviation has asked themselves that.
At one point in time,
At one
yes.
point or another, right? Should I be doing this as my day job or as my weekend passion, right?
And yet everybody comes back.
That's right. So, long story short, I mean, I did this company that was car sharing at airports back when the sharing economy was really hot. It was a really fun experience to kind of get involved in that whole ecosystem. I commuted back and forth from the East Coast to San Francisco, which got old after a while. I got that company through a Series B and got it up and running. I was sort of the first employee there. But this, the long story short there is I learned a valuable lesson for me, which was, I'm going to earn my living in private aviation, because in that business, when you had a bad day, you had a bad day. In this business, when you have a bad day, it's still aviation, and there's something in your heart and soul that says it's worth it because I love aviation. And I think anybody that's devoted themselves to this industry knows what I'm talking about.
So what was the idea behind Tuvoli? What did Tuvoli set out to accomplish?
Well, the journey is still ongoing, but the vision there was this industry is not connected in the best way, and there's too many failures, in service one way or another that could be improved with technology. And at the very core, at the bottom, sort of the base level, I looked at it and said, payments have to be a part of this, because the thing that really everybody has a story about is how they didn't get paid, right? And I looked at that and said, well, if we're going to help do better things with connecting companies and data and everything else, the first thing I want to make sure that we figured out is how to make sure that people get paid, right? And so that's not an easy thing to do. It's an ongoing journey. We now have over 200 companies that have accounts on our platform. They're doing more together, as things sort of evolve, but we're really, I think, early days in realizing that vision. Ultimately, if we can give people the confidence, right, that between the buyer and the seller, they're always going to get paid, and we can help streamline the process of moving money, which we can. I mean, we looked at that and looked at lots of different ways to wire this up, and ultimately said, if we can't deliver a 24/7, 365 set of, set of payment rails that can move money at any size, right? Which you would think that wouldn't be that hard, but like the whole payments world is focused on like the $2 transaction.
They don't understand our business.
They don't understand our business. They are.
So we've actually run into that on our side, on the FBO side of things. We have, obviously, there's a lot of FBOs still out there that have a charter department, and trying to run the charter payments within the FBO payments ends up making your FBO payments cost exponentially more,
right?
Because of the cost of charter and the risk involved. So moving an FBO from that to Tuvoli on the payment side would actually make their FBO payments less expensive.
Right. Well, and we wound up getting into credit card merchant processing because in talks with operators where he said, we've got this FBO, we've essentially white labeled a bank. That's how we can move money, is if you're on our bank, then we can move money from, the account that belongs to your company to an account that belongs to another. And one of the things that I think was important there is, we could have done all that and just moved money within a one common fund or account, but the stakes are too high, right? I wanted to make sure that people knew your money is honest to goodness in an FDIC insured proper bank account, right? And we have our own ledger on top of that would allow us to put money sort of anywhere virtually, because of there are different sort of sets of payment rails. We're an ecosystem with multiple ways to move
using
things.
That white label bank relationship.
Well, right. But at the foundation, we sort of said, hey, on top of all the ledger we have, we can also fall back on core banking ledgers that exist within the banking platform. So there's never a question of is your money where it's supposed to be, right? And it also provides the scrutiny that we need to have when we have to do proper know your customer to pass muster there. We have to, pass muster with the bank in terms of all the code reviews and things like that, right? To make sure that everything is really bulletproof.
That's also ensuring that your brokers too are higher quality, right?
Yes. I mean, the short answer there is we have people that have wanted to get accounts on the platform, and when we do the know your customer stuff, we find out that there's financial fraud in their background, and it's like a binary black and white thing. We can't approve anybody and have the platform that we have. The bank wouldn't approve it. The government wouldn't approve it. So when we do that KYC due diligence stuff, it makes it an easy decision. It's not a judgment call by me as to whether or not we could let somebody on. It's a hard and fast rule.
Cut and dry, yep.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I look at because, I almost challenge, you've only been in this business for a week maybe if you don't know somebody that hasn't been burned one way or another from someone, right?
On the payment side, yep.
On the payment side. And it's unfortunate, but the barriers to entry in this space, on the sales side, on the broker side are really low, right? And so, if you can pop up a Wix website and you got a cell phone, you can present yourself as a charter broker. And I'm not sure that necessarily should change because I'm not a big fan of regulation, but as an industry, we need to have ways to know
self-police
to protect ourselves, right? And and I've been on committees with MBAA and helped write things like charter broker best practices because I don't think charter brokering is bad or wrong. Obviously, I created a charter broker, but I was competing with guys that, that I didn't believe should be in the space, right? If you've defrauded people, right? Like there should be some way that there's that you can keep those guys out of the market. And that is a huge part of the ultimate vision for Tuvoli is if as a retail consumer or a charter operator or a broker, you look at Tuvoli and say, my transaction is safe and the service I'm going to get is going to meet a baseline, right? Because of the tools and the rails and everything that we put together, right?
Adding confidence and transparency to a process that often lacks it.
Yes, that's right. And there's, in order to be on Tuvoli, you have to pass checks that don't exist anywhere else in this industry, right? So if you're a charter, if you're a charter operator and a new broker comes along, how do you know what their background is? Yep. Oftentimes you don't have time to really do the kind of due diligence that we do. They're going to have to submit, social security numbers on the principals and their articles of incorporation. We're going to know whether they've ever been sued and what's gone on and things like that as a gating item to just being on the platform. So, what we want to be able to do is give operators a confidence that if you're working with a broker, they've been through that, and on top of that, if they're paying you on Tuvoli, that's cash. It's not like a credit card hold. It's cash that's moving instantly in real time.
So we're about out of time.
Yeah.
I think lastly, we'll just cover what's Tuvoli going to do next. What's the next step to make that broker operator process more seamless, easier for the brokers, easier for the operators? Can we make it easier for the owners? What's your guys' plan what's your next releases? Where are you headed?
Well, there's a few things there. So we look at ourselves on this front in two veins. So we've got tools that help improve the quality of service and then tools that facilitate payment. And I think they go hand in hand. And so the tools that really help service is we brand those Fly Easy. We acquired Fly Easy a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. Fantastic move, great guys. And so on that front, we have the sales tools product that started out as being a group of tools for brokers because we just saw opportunity there. It's really taking all the learning that I had with One Sky Jets and how the process needed to work and how we could instill quality, and now making that a product that brokers, universally can have access to. And then we amped it up with digital contracts and the payment processing and all the stuff that goes along with that. That tool set is finding its way into the broker side of the world. I'm sorry, not the broker. I said that wrong. It's finding its way to the operator side of the world. When I show an operator what we built there for sales pipeline management and all the tools and bells and whistles are very great. If we can leverage that on top of our scheduling software, that would be amazing.
Especially with what you call like the brokerators.
That's right. Right. You're spot on. The first customers for that are people that have a separate brokerage arm and a and a wholesale arm, but they kind of want it all to come together. So we're working with some of them, and that's coming down the pike. We want to improve quality by helping them all track that information, right? In a meaningful way. One of the things that I'll tell you that made me proud when we were at One Sky is we never, ever, ever lost a dispute to American Express. I mean, think about that, because everybody out there's, American Express is horrible. They always side with the customer. You want to know why? Because most of the time, the company that has the issue doesn't have the data to back up what actually happened. Well, in our thing, all we would have to do is print off that little, running tally, our Fedex tracking of every flight. And we had customer called up and said this, we did this happened, right? And we could just give them that running dialogue of everything that happened. And part of it was, if we screwed up, we owned it, right? We weren't going to not own it. But if we didn't screw up and the customer, wasn't being reasonable, well, we had this really...
The data to back it up.
We had the data to back it up, and we would send that off to American Express, and that was usually the end of it.
That's awesome. So you guys are booth
4846.
4846. So if you get this while you still at the show, 4846. If not, we'll include some information in when you subscribe to the podcast. Thanks a lot for coming by.
Hey,
appreciate
Jim,
it, my
always
friend.
a pleasure. Always a pleasure.